Welcome, everyone. I am Heidi Waldoch.
We are live. We are live.
We are licensed marriage and family therapist and owner of Bridging Hope Counseling. And I have with me today Luke Askew, motivational speaker. We are super excited to have him here today. I just want to share a little bit. Bridging Hope Counseling is a mental health practice based out of Minnesota. We have offices in Lino Lakes, Rogers, and Buffalo, Minnesota. And we have been doing these videos on Facebook Live and then also put them on YouTube. So we really appreciate your support, and we're really excited to have Luke here today to talk about his journey, share with us how he's been able to move through his own struggles and that he has a story to tell. And I'm super excited because he knows this personally, just like many of you listening. So Luke, could you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of dive into some other questions?
Yeah, so my name is Luke Askew. I'm from the United Kingdom, which is nice. So thanks for having me. It's like 9:30 in the evening here. What time is it there?
Half 3:30. Yep, 3:30.
3:30. Yeah. So I'm a motivational speaker. I'm also a youth worker chaplain within a high school over here, a mindset coach, and many other hats that I like to wear.
Awesome. That is very cool. So you are doing this many reasons because of your personal journey. So would you mind kind of sharing with us what that journey has been and kind of what got you into this and what your story as mental health has been?
Yeah. So for me, I've always been somebody that's wanted to help people. That's always been in my nature. I've always wanted to help people, kind of inspire people. So when I was 19, somebody said to me, "Hey, you're quite good at speaking. You should become a motivational speaker." And I was like, okay. And I didn't know how to do it. And I remember doing what every young lad would do. I Googled how to be a motivational speaker. Some guy, I don't know if you guys know him because he is American, called Josh Shipp. He's like a big youth speaker in America. I saw one of his advertisements who was like, "Hey, do you want to be a motivational speaker?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "Do you want to know how to do it?" I'm like, "Yes." And he goes, "It's going to cost you $2,500. And I was like, and I didn't have the money. And I remember putting it all on it like a 0% credit card without telling my parents. And I kind of started this journey of kind of becoming a motivational speaker. And I absolutely loved it. And I had a message, and my big message was go after your dreams, go after your goals. Anything is possible. Kind of, if you fail, get back up. It was very much kind of your typical motivational speaker. But because I was so young, I guess people kind of enjoyed it. And it was highly successful. And I got like interviewed for many things and in the newspapers. But along that journey, I was probably about a year and a half in, and I started to compare myself like a lot of us do, right? I started to compare myself to other speakers. I started to compare myself to people within my industry, within the business sector. And I started kind of looking at myself and kind of thinking, I'm like none of these people and they're highly successful. So I'll tell you what, I should maybe try and become like them. So I started to kind of copy the messages that they were kind of saying. I started to dress like them, started to act like them. I think at one time I nearly had an American accent. But I just started to get so lost. And I started to lose a sense of kind of who I was. And being a young lad, I didn't really know who I was, if I was honest. But for me, when I was growing up, my identity was always wrapped in what I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like when someone goes, "Hey, like, so tell us more about you." And the first thing that people say, I'm a father as well. I've got a beautiful son and a beautiful fiance, is that we're very quick to go to like our career. Well, I'm this, I'm a speaker, I'm this, I'm that. And we wrap our whole identity in what we do. And the truth is that when I was younger, I was a PE teacher, and that's what I wrapped my identity in. Then I became a youth motivational speaker, so I wrapped my identity in that. But along the journey, I just started to think, hang on a minute, who's Luke Askew? Because the unique selling point of me was me. And when I started to not be like me anymore, I was just fitting in with everyone else. So there's nothing unique about me anymore. And my business started to just decline. And the pressure of trying to succeed in life, definitely as a young man, I tried to become somebody. I had a big ego. I wanted to be successful. I still had a heart for people, but I wanted to be successful. And I just started to get lost in myself. And I'm someone that's always been into personal development. I've always been somebody, you know, my dad drilled it into me, Tony Robbins into me when I was like 14. So I've always been somebody that's been into personal development and success, but nothing prepared me for a sense of losing my identity. Nothing kind of prepared me for me losing the sense of who I was.
So how would you say that you were able to move from that and out of that identity of not being Luke? And how are you able to move into that identity? And you have a message that's very powerful, which is we're not meant to survive. We're meant to thrive. So how did you move to that place of thriving and out of that place of just surviving?
Yeah, so I was after the panic attack, everything just started going downhill. I split up with my partner at the time because I knew that wasn't right. I kind of lost my flat, refused to go home because, you know, of pride. So I went to live in Manchester with my uncle. And I remember I was in the back garden and I was hysterically crying for 4 hours, literally like just straight. And I say that in that moment, I got to a point where I was at the end of my will. In other words, I just got to the point now where I didn't know what to do anymore. And I just had this moment where I kind of called out, you know, to the heavens, to something. And I was just like, right, if there's anything that can possibly save me or help me, like, can you please just help me? And then from there, my whole life changed, because what started to happen slowly is that in that moment, there's a great sense of peace. It was like I released something. I kind of released the responsibility and kind of had to trust something else, that I was going to be okay for a second. I kind of had a sense of hope for 1 second that if there is something, it might help me. And then from there, things just started to piece up. Like, people started to come into my life. I grew up non-faith at all, but a lot of people who turned out to be Christians started coming into my life. And started to kind of explain to me how they took their pain to purpose and how their faith played a massive part in that. So if I'm totally honest with you, I started going through a stage of my life going, well, I don't know what to do anymore. I said, I tried doing life by myself and that didn't go too well. I've asked for advice and that isn't going too well. I said, so I think I'm at a point where I'm going to have to try and trust something bigger than me to kind of lead me in the right direction. And that's where my journey started, to find out, okay, if there is something, how do I trust it? If there is something, what does it say about me personally? And all these questions started to arise. And I remember I watched a video. It was called When Anxiety Attacks, and it was by a pastor called Stephen Furtick of Elevation.
Yeah.
And he explained something. And I grew up non-faith. But he delivered a message talking about anxiety, and he linked it to something within the Bible at the time. And it was like something just went in my mind. It was like, oh my gosh, like, that's how I feel. And you've just given me an explanation of why and how I could get through it. So for the first time ever, I started to go, hang on a minute, this guy makes sense. So I started binge watching like loads of his stuff and loads of other people's stuff. And then he started talking about who kind of I was. And they were saying, well, God sees you this way and God sees you that way. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know who I am. So who can you say who I am? And I went on this journey of just kind of realizing in my own time and people of that, hang on a minute, this thing that I'm trusting says that I am an expression of him. And that expression was love. So I started to realize, hang on a minute, what happens if I'm more powerful than I thought I was? What happens if actually I was made for a reason? What happens actually if I had a purpose and meaning and something to really kind of go after in life? So I started to look at life from that perspective, and then things logically just started to happen. I started to just say, okay, and I'd love to do this with your audience. If you look around the room wherever you are now, and I say to you, pick 3 items around the room and tell me the purpose of them items, you'd go around and go, well, the clock tells the time, the poster has information on it, the glass serves water. And I go, tell me something in the world that doesn't have a purpose. And when you ask yourself that question, you start to go, hang on a minute. I can't think of anything that was created or made without first having a purpose in which it was created.
Yeah.
So when I asked that question, I said, so why would I believe that I didn't have a purpose if I was created? Why would it that human beings are the only things in the whole world that wouldn't be made for a reason? And I started to ask myself the question, well, hang on a minute. If I was made for a reason, what is that reason? And if I was made for a reason, what am I meant to be doing? Who am I? And how very, very quickly can I align myself to the purpose in which I was created? And then I started to just discover kind of things that I never knew about me. In other words, people like said, you should be a motivational speaker. So I started asking people, I started to go, what is it about me that's unique? And they go, oh, Luke, you got a good sense of humor. You're a great communicator. And they started to reel off like gifts and kind of talents I had. And I was like, all right, great. And then I started to go, so what happens if I was given them for a reason and a purpose? What happens if I was meant to use the gift and my character and my personality to do something in the world? And if I do have a purpose, then these gifts and talents aren't for me. They're actually for me to use to go and serve somebody else. And that's what started to change my life, because then I stopped thinking about me and what I was going through, but I started looking at me and thinking, how can I bring value to the world through what God gave me? And that's when I led back on the path of, hey, I was meant to be a speaker, but this life isn't about success, isn't about money. It isn't about becoming somebody. It's about realizing that you are somebody and that you were created to really go and serve one another in the unique ways that we were created. So now when I stand on stage, I realize that, hang on a minute, God created me for a specific reason. So when there's another speaker on stage, I can't compare myself to them because God created them for a specific reason, but I'm unique as well. So I started staying in my lane and realizing that I'm always going to be miserable if I'm always comparing myself to other people, because I'm never going to look like them and I was never meant to be like them. So I need to work out who I am, be confident in who I am, and also start to trust that actually I was created to go and add some value in the world. And I lost myself in service. Wow. So what I say to people with the message Made to Thrive, whether you're of faith or you're not of faith, I don't believe that God creates anything just to grow and die. I don't believe a seed gets planted for the sake of a flower just growing and dying. I realize that if something's created, it's created for a purpose, and it's created to thrive. It's created to do something, to be productive, to add value, or it'd be pointless to make it. So when I work with children, when I speak on stage, I want everyone in this who's watching this now, you weren't created just to survive life. You were created to thrive. You were made for a specific reason, and you were made to do something so incredible in the world. But the thing is that sometimes when no one tells you that as you're growing up, no one tells you how special you are. No one tells you that actually you play such a unique part in the world, that the world can sometimes overshadow you, and it can also kind of knock you off path. So learning to stand in the sense of, yeah, I was made to thrive. So if I was made to thrive, I better find out what the heck I'm meant to be doing. And I know it's not going to look like anyone else. And that's hard in a social media world, because what do? We compare each other all the time.
But it's so important. This is such a powerful message, and this is such a huge message of hope. I mean, it is so hopeful what you are saying. And we are like past time already. So, and there's a few other messages that you have. We don't have time to go into them, but something else that you have said to me, which is freedom starts coming as soon as you realize you're not the center of the universe. It's something that you have said.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You
Yeah.
also have a really good message where you talk about I am versus you can feel depressed versus I am depressed, that it's okay to feel sad or feel angry or feel something, but that you are not, that's just your feelings. It's not who you are. And I think you just have a lot of really awesome messages. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story, the ups and the downs, and just this hope and this. And the other thing that you actually share is that it's okay to not be okay, but then you have also that we're meant to thrive. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So how could our audience members connect with you? Do you have, are you on social media platforms? What would be the best way for people to connect with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to kind of follow my stuff, I would say Instagram's probably the best place. So I am Luke Askew. That's not because I've got a big ego. That's just because Luke Askew was taken. So yeah, I am Luke Askew, and people can kind of watch my stuff on there. But yeah, every piece of content that I do is around kind of this topic and knowing who you are and your individuality and equipping you to be the best that you could possibly be to go and make a difference in the world.